how are you? Welcome on in.
Podcast by George.
Another podcast by George.
Podcast by George. Border to border, coast to coast. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to another podcast by George. Let me click this button here, bring myself up full screen and say Happy Mother's Day, everybody. It's going to kind of be the theme, moving around behind the scene. I like that on podcast by George today because we're going to be talking about some stuff, particularly with the Iowa Legislature. Laura Bellin's going to be coming on here she's got more jaw-dropping reporting coming from the Iowa Legislature. Well, I kind of wanted to start off with a little Mother's Day stuff here. People think, oh God, I'm an old grouch and a curmudgeon and stuff. I can be a softie. Let me bring this up on screen, folks. That's my mom. Check that out. Yeah, that would be circa 1955, 1956. Honest to God, there I am on the hood of a truck. I came out of a trucking and farming family out there on the farm, and that's my mom looking young, and God rest her soul. I mean, I just love that photo. Yeah, that's me, believe it or not. And I do this all the time. I do the math. If you were to back that up from today to then, the number of years since I was that age, you'd be looking at the late 1800s when this photo was taken, if you backed up that far from when the photo was taken. But happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. And I also wanted to bring this up on screen because this gets to the origins of Mother's Day, which I was largely unaware of. I may have heard of this, but like a lot of things, I forget. I got this from the good folks at Code Pink. Medea Benjamin's been on my show, and it says, around the world, mothers are calling for peace. Originally, before the commercialization, commodification, and individualization of Mother's Day, the radical celebration was the brainchild of a brilliant woman, Julia Ward Howe, who was horrified by the carnage and suffering during the Civil War and the economic devastation that followed. She was also heartbroken by the outbreak of war between France and Germany in 1870, with its ominous display of German military might and imperial designs. She used her poetic gift to pen a proclamation against war, a proclamation that birthed Mother's Day. Yeah, I was kind of unaware of that. Quote, "We will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands will not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, the women of one country, will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs." And this is from one of the co-founders of Code Pink, Jody Evans. She writes, the potency of Julia Ward Howe's words, "We will not raise our children to kill another mother's child," is simple and clear. Those who vote for war, build weapons, invest in war, and don't sit at the negotiating table are all killing another mother's child. Having a simple commitment to Julia Ward Howe's call would change the world. What would it take for us to make that commitment? And to read on here, now this is from Medea Benjamin. I'm going to get stand by now. Laura's in the wings here. She's in the green room. She's going to be coming on here very shortly. Medea Benjamin was on my show, a few months ago. And Medea, co-founder of Code Pink, writes, "This is our day, moms. Let's reclaim it and embrace its origins. One day should not be solely about us as individuals, but about us embodying the collective desires of mothers around the world to stop our children from killing and being killed by other mothers' children. No one is going to bring that to us on a breakfast platter. It's something that we women demand. As peace-loving citizens of the world and as mothers fighting for a better future for our children, we urge you to support an immediate ceasefire and negotiated peace in Ukraine. Tell U.S. President Biden, NATO Commander Jens Stoltenberg, and EU Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen to support negotiations, not more weapons, to resolve the crisis in Ukraine. Well, God, I just love that. And people that know my left-wing anti-war perspective can certainly understand that. Let me play this real quick. Just because I love these clips. I play these because this is Medea Benjamin here just recently. This is just in the past week. This is the kind of stuff that Medea does. I mean, she walks it like she talks it. This was on World Press Freedom Day. And this Anthony Blinken's on stage with this guy from the Washington Post. Check this out.
Not one word about journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who was murdered by the Israeli occupation forces.
Tell us about the efforts the State Department has made to get Evan free. And in particular, I'm curious whether you've been able to talk.
Excuse us, we can't use this day without calling for the freedom of Julian Assange. The Biden... The extradition request for Julian Assange.
2 hours and not one word.
Take it easy, take it easy, take it easy, guys.
Not one word about journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who was murdered by the Israeli occupation forces in Palestine.
We're here to celebrate freedom of expression, and we just experienced it. Let me continue, Mr. Secretary, to ask you about Evan Gershkovich and your efforts to get him free.
Okay, so there you go. I just wanted to show that because of Medea. I mean, she needs to be recognized for those efforts. That ain't easy, folks, to do what she's doing. I don't know if you saw her now, but she hooked her foot around the chair of Blinken there to keep from being dragged off screen. And the ultimate irony there, they're talking about that Wall Street Journal reporter being imprisoned on espionage charges in Russia. And of course, the United States keeps Julian Assange imprisoned in Belmarsh on espionage charges. And he's considered by many to be the world's greatest journalist, a publisher that is being imprisoned by the United States. So she wanted to bring that up. And then Shireen Abu Akleh, that was the other thing that they were bringing up. They'd sat for 2 hours through this presentation, this glad handing, and no mention of that. So happy Mother's Day to Medea Benjamin. Okay, so let me get this up on screen here. Do proper introduction for our guest today, folks. It is Laura Bellin with Bleeding Heartland. That's a community blog providing original reporting and commentary about Iowa politics, especially campaigns and elections, state government, social, and environmental issues. Bleeding Heartland also covers what the Iowans in Congress are up to and any federal, state, or local policies of interest to our readers. Now, Laura Bellin has been at the controls. She's the primary author and sole editor of Bleeding Heartland since 2008. Recognized nationwide as an authority on Iowa politics, the legislature, the judiciary, and of course, the governor's office. Kim Reynolds, the Kingfisher, as I call her, the COVID Kim, a lot of people call her. We're going to be talking about that today. And of course, Laura also can be heard on KHOI Community Radio. That's up in Ames, 89.1 FM. She regularly appears on the program Capital Week. And I love having her on the show because she's, first and foremost, an outstanding print journalist, but she's just as good on the air. She's really good here. Let me get this up on screen and say good morning. Happy Mother's Day, by the way, to Laura Bellin. Hi, Laura.
Good morning. Thanks, George.
Yeah, thanks for coming on in here. So we got a ton of things to cover, and Laura and I always, I don't think we've ever done a show where we didn't run out of time, and it's because all of this, what in the hell stuff is going on? Let me bring this up on screen here to talk about first and foremost. This is very timely. This is by Laura's good friend, Clark Kaufman, who I've tried to come on my show. I'm trying to get him on here. Maybe we will someday.
He doesn't do a lot of public appearances.
Yeah, he's not a broadcast guy. He's not like you. Okay, Iowans sue the governor for cutting off pandemic unemployment benefits. Check this out. Now, this was in, first and foremost, it was in Iowa Capital Dispatch, and it's appearing on Bleeding Heartland now. A potential class action lawsuit claims Governor Kim Reynolds' refusal to pay pandemic-related jobless assistance to 30,000 Iowans was unlawful and deprives those individuals of life-sustaining benefits. Lawyers for Carla Smith of Pleasantville and Holly Bledel of Clinton have filed a lawsuit in U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Iowa, claiming the two women and thousands of other Iowans were illegally denied unemployment benefits in 2021 due to the actions of Reynolds and Iowa Workforce Development Director Beth Townsend. Now, if you read into this closely, Laura, and the reporting here, this is very interesting. And this is where it really started to get interesting for me. The plaintiff's benefits were cut off in June 2021. Okay, get in the Wayback Machine, folks. Mm-hmm. June 2021. We're in the depths of the pandemic here. I mean, these are the dark days. And Smith, who worked at Casey's General Store when the pandemic hit, alleges that in mid-March 2020, her doctor told her a pre-existing lung condition made it dangerous for her to continue working in a retail setting that had yet to install plexiglass dividers at workstations and didn't require face masks. Okay, a couple of things I would say here about Casey's. Everybody knows Casey's. Well, these people that work there, they tend to work long hours, lots of days consecutively, very little, if any, vacation. And they are meeting and greeting thousands of people. They have no control over it. I mean, whoever walks in the door under whatever condition walks in the door. And so here's this woman with this condition. And so she alleges she quit her job to self-quarantine and began collecting PEUC benefits of a whopping $408 per week, in addition to FPUC benefits to pay for food, housing, and other monthly expenses. Well, Reynolds and Townsend's decision to terminate Iowa's involvement in the federal programs left Smith without a critical source of income. And we're talking about enough just to survive, folks. I mean, honest to God, $408 a week, just as the Delta variant surged, the lawsuit claims. Okay, Laura, you can pick it up there. But I initially, I thought this wasn't, that big of a personal story, but I got to reading about this, and this is horrific.
I want to first give credit to Clark Kaufman and Iowa Capital Dispatch. Clark, if you're not reading Iowa Capital Dispatch, you really should be. Clark is like a scoop machine over there, longtime investigative reporter for the Des Moines Register. Then he was out of journalism for a couple of years and came back when Iowa Capital Dispatch launched. And I do appreciate that they give other media permission to republish their stories, because in this case, when Clark broke this story, I was very interested in the lawsuit, but I was knee deep in reading and writing about the Iowa Supreme Court's ruling that was announced on Friday in a pretty significant transgender rights case. So I didn't feel like I had the time to shift gears and write about this, but I was really happy that I was able to republish Clark's story. This is something, I mean, I did cover at Bleeding Heartland at the time when the Governor Reynolds has repeatedly, under the guise of solving Iowa's workforce problems, has hurt unemployed people in Iowa, has cut back. This was one example of cutting back federal unemployment benefits, but also she and the Republican legislature during last year's session, they cut back on the maximum amount of state unemployment benefits that people can receive. And of course, it's not a real approach to solve workforce problems. I mean, only a small minority, less than 20% of unemployed people are even receiving any jobless benefits at all. And as you say, nobody's getting rich off of unemployment benefits. This is something people are just getting by on. But in any case, Iowa was one of a number of red states that announced that they were ending these federally funded pandemic-related unemployment benefits early. And so this lawsuit, and they're trying to get it certified as a class action lawsuit. That takes time for the courts to decide whether they'll do that. But it's a classic example of when you would need a class action lawsuit, because it's going to be very difficult for the tens of thousands of individuals affected by this to each bring their own cases. But they lost about 3 months of unemployment benefits. Iowa didn't save any money because these were 100% federally funded. And also the lawsuit asserts a claim under a state law. There's a part of the state code on unemployment benefits says that the state shall do their best basically to ensure that Iowans receive the unemployment benefits they're entitled to. So this is going to be really interesting. I don't know what their odds are of succeeding. As you know, litigation, it often takes years, but predictably, Kim Reynolds kind of misstated. She released a statement on this Friday saying the federal government doesn't get to tell Iowa what to do. And it's like, well, this isn't the federal government suing you. This was Iowans suing you. And the point is that you took away their benefits that they were entitled to without any good reason. So I'm very interested to see how this plays out.
Yeah, and I oversimplify things, but if I got this right now, this money was came down to the benefit of Iowans, you and me, people here in the state, and the governor has picked our pocket, so to speak. Now, the bad news is she and the legislature and the people running this state and that type of thing would be in charge of picking and choosing and administering how the money was used, and that was one of my issues with the CARES Act. Obviously, I wanted it to go straight to the people, but still, ostensibly, it was for us, and we don't get it, right? Because
Well, and there were an estimated 30,000 people, and possibly more, but at least 30,000 Iowans had been receiving these extra federally funded pandemic-related unemployment benefits. It was a supplement to the regular unemployment benefits they were entitled to. And that's tens of thousands of people. I mean, on top of being cruel to the people who are now losing these benefits, it's also just economically stupid because you're talking millions and millions of federal dollars every week that are not coming into the state. So that's money people aren't spending on goods and services in their own communities. And it's very similar to what the Iowa Legislature just did with the food assistance, which the governor hasn't signed that bill yet, but she's expected to sign it any day now. That is just tens of millions of dollars a month are just not going to come into the state of Iowa. That's 100% federally funded. So it doesn't make any sense. It's cruel and it's bad for the economy.
It kind of gets to the very fundamentals, the very essence of this situation regarding Reaganism and the Republicans and the way they view things and the way people like Laura and I view things. They believe that you give that money, you let people, the Sharpies like Kim Reynolds and Bruce Rastetter and people like that, you give them the money. You let them decide what's best for us, and they'll take care of us. That's the fundamental of trickle down. And everybody laughs about that, but hell, Reagan believed that. I think people like Reynolds still believe that. They don't want to give that to us, to the unemployed, to people like that to fritter away. Look at this. This is your editor's note on this. Editor's note from Laura Bellin. In a statement released on May 12th, Reynolds commented, quote, this is, Laura mentioned this, the federal government doesn't get to run the state of Iowa or impose policies that damage our economy. Paying people to stay home at a time when there are more jobs available than people to fill them defies common sense. Iowans know there is dignity in work. Yeah, working with a lung condition in a pandemic that strikes the respiratory system, for God's sake. There's a lot of dignity in that, Laura.
Right. And I mean, just generally, this is a fallacy that the governor said a year ago in her condition of the state speech to the legislature. She said that unemployment benefits, that they started out as a safety net and they've become more of a hammock for some people. So that was the justification for cutting back on unemployment that people could receive. That the idea is that this is somehow keeping people out of the workforce. But we know that it's the unemployment benefits are not what's keeping people out of the workforce. Many people the vast majority of people who are not working right now are not receiving any unemployment. And also there are just fundamental problems with lack of transportation. Childcare is one of the biggest issues in Iowa. So, I mean, the fact that there are jobs available that people don't want to fill, also just low pay. I mean, try raising people's pay and then maybe you'll get more people to work for you. But the approach of the governor and the Republican-controlled legislature is just let's try other ways to try to force people back in the workforce, whether it's cutting unemployment benefits last year or relaxing these child labor regulations this year to try to get more kids. And the governor has already said she's going to sign that bill. She hasn't signed it yet. But again, like any day now, it's probably going to happen. So the restaurant industry, grocery stores, other industries that have trouble filling vacancies, well, let's just get kids and then we can avoid raising wages.
So, okay, I'm going to play this because again, this dovetails very nicely with what we're talking about. And I had it in queue here because I had it on the show a couple of times ago. I love this film clip, but again, it gets to the fundamentals of what we're talking about here. This is John Kennedy in 1960 talking about Medicare. And again, this perspective, them that's got it versus them that don't. You need to work. Your labor needs to be there so that we can benefit from it and vacation down in the Gulf of Mexico, as John Mellencamp said. Watch this.
We do not affect the freedom of choice. You can go to any doctor you want. The doctor and you work out your arrangements with him. We talk about his hospital bills. All these arguments were made against Social Security at the time of Franklin Roosevelt. They're made today. And then other people say, why doesn't the government mind its own business? What is the government's business is the question. This bill serves the public interest. It involves the government because it involves the public welfare. The Constitution of the United States did not make the President or the Congress powerless. It gave them definite responsibilities to advance the general welfare. And that is what we're attempting to do. read that this bill will sap the individual self-reliance of Americans. I can't imagine anything worse or anything better to sap someone's self-reliance than to be sick, alone, broke, or to have saved for a lifetime and put it out in a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months. This argument that the government should stay out, that it saps our pioneer stock. I used to hear that argument when we were talking about raising the minimum wage to $1.25. The fact of the matter is, what saps anyone's self-reliance is working 60 hours at straight time, or working at 85 or 95 or $1 an hour. In England, the entire cost of medicine for people of all ages, all of it, doctors, the choice of doctors, hospitals, from the time you're born to the time you die, are included in a government program. We are now talking about doing most of the countries of Europe did years ago. The British did it 30 years ago. We are behind every country pretty nearly in Europe in this matter of medical care for our citizens.
Well, I don't want to get involved too much into the hyperbole of this, but the other thing that he's getting at there, Laura, and it's what Reynolds was getting at. It's this states' rights. Who trumps who? The federal government isn't going to give the people of Iowa, the unemployed, money. They're not going to determine who does that. Kim Reynolds is going to determine that. And again, I'm extending this a little bit, but it always reminds me of George Wallace standing in front of the school, on the steps of the school down there in Alabama, saying he was not going to let segregation happen. They were not going to let those black kids come in that white school. You know what? Yeah, they were. The federal government came in with the National Guard. Those kids went to school, and George Wallace and his states' rights be damned. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this lawsuit, again, the legal issues are very different from the way the governor portrays it, that they're making a due process claim under the federal constitution and federal law. And then they're also claiming that Iowa law was violated, that Iowa law says that the state government is supposed to ensure that Iowans receive the unemployment benefits they're entitled to. And this didn't happen because the governor, on the advice of the Iowa Workforce Development Director, Beth Townsend, who's also a named defendant in the lawsuit, they recommended that the state end their participation in these pandemic-related programs early. And it wasn't a cost savings for the state because this was a federally funded program. So again, I don't know how this is going to play out in federal court, but it certainly, reading through the plaintiff's court filing, it looked to me like they were making some pretty strong arguments.
Well, we'll follow it with interest, obviously. I just love to raise the visibility of it. That's why I'm doing this show, folks. I mean, I just want to bring these issues to the forefront. I
want to just remind people again that Iowa Capitol Dispatch was first to report that, and people really should be reading Iowa Capitol Dispatch if they're not already.
Clark Kaufman. Another muckraker. I mean, I love that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's get to some of Laura's reporting here. This was in Bleeding Heartland. Now, that lawsuit is a long way from being settled, obviously, but some of the things here, at least short term, that we're going to be talking about are settled, Laura. This is 6 ways, you write, the GOP budget shortchanged Iowans with disabilities. And again, I do the head snap when I look at this. Really? Yeah. You're right. The biggest stories of the Iowa Legislature's 2023 session are well known. Before adjourning for the year on May 4th, historically large Republican majorities in the Iowa House and Senate gave Governor Kim Reynolds almost everything on her wish list. They reshaped K-12 public schools, passed several bills targeting LGBTQ Iowans, enacting new hurdles for Iowans on public assistance, cut property taxes. And I don't know if they cut the big corporations enough, but reorganize state government to increase the power of the governor and her attorney general and undermine the state auditor's ability to conduct independent audits. And then you do this rundown. I call it the 6-6, the sickly 6, starting off with a big cut to area education agencies. I got to admit, I was completely unaware of this one.
Right. Well, most people were. And here's the thing. This was a terrible legislative session for disabled Iowans. Yes. I interviewed last week. I just haven't published the interview yet. I interviewed Josh Turek, who's a new state representative from Council Bluffs and is the only member of the legislature to have a permanent disability. He's used a wheelchair since childhood. And he was talking about what it was like to serve in the legislature this year amid just an absolute assault on disabled Iowans. And not this, the post that we're about to talk about focused on just the Republican budget, which was finalized last week, but the week prior to my publishing the article. But there were many other bills that are terrible for Iowans with disabilities. The school voucher bill, where many private schools just don't even accept kids with special needs, the cuts to the food assistance, which are going to disproportionately affect disabled Iowans. But this thing, the area education agencies, that's a part of public education a lot of people don't know much about. And this only appeared like the budget amendments were published a day before they were debated, and then they were passed in both chambers. So there was hardly any time for people to react to it. So the area education agencies provide a lot of special services, particularly to smaller rural school districts that can't afford to have like speech therapists on staff. So they provide all kinds of speech therapy and other interventions. They provide special education for smaller districts. And for kids who are prior to preschool, 0 to 3, they provide a lot of services, occupational therapy, physical therapy, some behavioral interventions for, and really kids 0 to 18. But it's particularly important for people whose kids have special needs. And in most parts of Iowa, if your child needs these services, there really is no place to get it other than the area education agency. Some larger metros have some private services, but they're so expensive, hardly anybody can really afford that. So this is a very big cut. While the Republicans are spending $107 million on this new school voucher program just in the first year, and they cut the area education agency's budgets by almost 30 million. And that is going to be, the brunt of that is going to be borne by kids with disabilities and their families.
Yeah, I'm going to run through this list here, and I want everybody to think and try to conjure an explanation. Why? Why are they doing this? Kim Reynolds was sitting on a pot of federal money, a pot of gold for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no shortage of money, right?
No,
I mean,
and this state budget, not only are we still sitting on a lot of federal money, but this state budget budgets for about a $2 billion surplus. I mean, the legislature is they're allowed under state law, they're allowed to appropriate 99% of projected revenues. And you can say, okay, well, you might not want to go all the way up to 99%, right? Because your revenue projections, that's not an exact science, and you could have a shortfall. But this budget is going to spend around like 82% of projected revenue. So they're basically sitting on almost $1 in every $5 they expect to come in. So sitting on an enormous amount of money, and yet making these big cuts. And again, it will be felt more even in the rural areas than it will in the larger urban areas, but it's going to adversely affect all Iowans.
yeah, let's move on down the list here because it gets better, it gets worse,
Yeah.
much worse. Long wait for disability service. And I got a feeling that anybody that has a disabled child or family member that they're taking care of and that type of thing, this is a big one, Laura.
Yeah, so this is, again, it's a federally administered program. There are these Medicaid waivers. One of them is called the brain injury waiver, health and disability waiver. There are 7 different waivers that the Department of Human Services, now it's been merged. So now it's the Department of Health and Human Services. But and these have had long waiting lists for a long time. I mean, I can remember having my oldest son is in college now, but I remember one of his contemporaries who has on the autism spectrum, and I think that his parents had to wait a couple of years to get him the services that he was entitled to get under this waiver. But now, Josh Turek was one of the main people in the legislature raising the alarm about this, that some of these waivers now have wait lists of 4 years, 5 years. I mean, imagine if you or your loved one desperately needed these services. And I mean, a 4-year wait is just, it's just beyond comprehension. I mean, I destroyed my ankle about not quite a year and a half ago, and it feels like forever, and I wouldn't even be a third of the way through my waiting list if I had a condition that was eligible for one of these waivers. And the question is, how much new money are they really investing in buying down these waiting lists? And the answer is not very much. And I think actually the information that the Republican gave on the House floor, I think even exaggerated the amount that they are investing in it. So it's just a dire situation if you're in one of these Iowans, and there are, I think now he said 17,000 Iowans on waiting lists, and you're going to be waiting for years. And we have the money if the legislature would just allocate the money.
And if this is you, if this is your family member, if this is your acquaintance, this, yeah, and it gets worse. I mean, the list goes here. I want to bring this up. This is because I was reading this list and I go, what in the hell?
I
Okay.
know. I know.
Let me go to this next one here because I started to read. I couldn't believe it. I mean,
I
no
know.
state funding for K through 12 Braille materials. Now, is this by accident or by design? Again, plenty of money, but these items are not that expensive, I wouldn't think. Well, what is this? Why don't they
Well,
do this?
I want to give a shout out to the Democratic legislators. I'm sure it must be really hard for them a lot of days with these Republican extremely large majorities, and the Democrats, all they can do is stand up there and give their reasons for opposing these policies. And this was something I was unaware of. It was part of the education budget, but Eleanor Levin, who's a new state representative from Iowa City, she raised this point because she serves on this budget subcommittee that covers the education area. And she was explaining how there used to be, so there's under the U.S. Department of Education, there used to be federal funding for Braille and large print material for K through 12 students who are blind or visually impaired. And something changed with the way the funding works. So now, instead of this being a federally funded thing, that individual school districts are now responsible for purchasing these materials. Well, as she pointed out, I mean, I doubt even the largest school districts in Iowa have people on staff who are capable and qualified to evaluate what's a good Braille material. I mean, it's just not something sighted people wouldn't even know if it's correctly printed in Braille. So the Department of Education, or the Department for the Blind rather, had requested a $500,000 line item to create like a state repository of materials, instructional materials library that could be available to blind or visually impaired students anywhere in the state of Iowa. And the legislature in this part of the budget, they did fund one extra full-time position for the Department for the Blind. And like, that was actually significant because most state agencies were getting status quo budgets this year. They weren't even getting an increase that corresponds to the inflation rate. So, I mean, the Department for the Blind did get one extra employee, but they did not get any of this $500,000. And I tried to get an answer. I couldn't get an answer from anybody. Like, is there some other pot of money that can be tapped for these materials? And so it looks like that either the K through 12 individual school districts are going to be responsible for buying this. They're going to have staff who don't know anything trying to order materials. Or as Eleanor Levin pointed out, it could be that a lot of school districts will just order more audio materials because audiobooks, that's something that can be used by a large part of the student body, whereas Braille materials would be really targeted toward the educational experience of blind students. And I mean, the problem is that you've got, for students who are blind, it's very important to become competent in reading Braille. This is what the research tells us. And so the state really should be funding this. And it looks like the state isn't going to fund this unless there's some other amount of money that can be shifted around. But I haven't been able to get an answer on whether that's going to be forthcoming.
Yeah, the state should be funding it. Remember John Kennedy in that clip? This is what government should be doing in my mind. I mean, that's why I'm so opposed to the war and all the money that we're spending in other places on the federal level. But on the state level, the same type of thing. This is what I want my state government to do.
It was a very tough session for blind Iowans. That state government reorganization plan included a provision that gave the governor the power to hire and fire the director of the Department for the Blind. And that was something that basically everybody in the blind community, I mean, I attended the subcommittees, dozens of people, members of the blind community, showed up to plead with Republican legislators, don't do this, that this can undermine the quality of the services we receive and depend on. And they just passed the governor's bill without any significant amendment.
I'm not going to go too deep in the weeds here again, but I will say this. I look at these types of things that are coming down the pike. Things are going to get worse. Things are going to change. This Republican-dominated legislature that Laura is talking about, this is part of it here in Iowa. The U.S. Supreme Court, I mean, affirmative action is going away. Voting rights are going away. Things are going to get worse, folks. Elections have consequences. That's part of it. Yeah. But the other part of it is I look at this and I think, my God, Republicanism. What the hell's happened here? Because I'm old. I mean, I know Republicans from back in the 60s and 70s. They were not like this. Were they just undercover? Does this go back further than this? Are we looking at something rearing its ugly head in America, in Iowa from the 20s and 30s? Or is this an outgrowth of just the most recent history and Trumpism?
I
I'm not
think
so sure.
Well, look, I mean, Democrats and Republicans have always argued over how much money to spend on the social welfare net. So, I mean, I would say just generally as a group, Republicans have always wanted to spend less, but I think it's much more extreme now. I mean, we never had Republicans in Iowa trying to deprive people of federal food assistance they were entitled to receive. We never saw, I mean, the blind community, I remember several people who came and spoke to these subcommittees said they're Republicans themselves, that they, so it hasn't been a partisan issue in the past. And the structure of the Department for the Blind is something that's been in place for generations, where the director was appointed by a commission made up of blind Iowans, because those people actually know what it's like to be blind and what services are important. That's the whole reason why the governor historically hasn't appointed the department director, even though the governor does appoint most other agency directors. So I do think there's something new. I don't know. I mean, the cuts to the area education agencies, that has been going on for a long time, but this is the most extreme cut that they've received. So, you know, again, I would say that underfunding of public education is something that I would say Republicans have been about for a while, but it's just getting to an extreme level, especially since now we're going to have a blank check out for the private schools, which are going to be getting hundreds of millions of dollars a year in public funds for the school voucher plan.
Yeah. And again, I want to continue with the article here,
Yeah,
because I
thank
read
you.
that and I think, okay, this got to be one in a million. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. I can't believe this.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just,
Support for deaf children only partly funded. I understand. We were talking about blind kids here earlier. The deaf.
you know, this was amazing to me. And actually, this was informative because I had published, I mean, I want to say 5 years ago, somebody in the deaf community wrote a guest post for my website on how they were trying to get this program. There's a program called Lead K. It's a language acquisition for deaf and hard of hearing children, because the research shows that deaf children are often well behind their peers by the time they even get to kindergarten, and that it's very important for deaf children to be learning American Sign Language before kindergarten. That's critically important. So this Lead K program, actually, I didn't know this until just this recent budget debate. The legislature did approve code language in 2022 that said the Department of Education is going to have this Lead K program. It's going to be about language acquisition for deaf children and support for their families and mentoring for their families, but they didn't attach any funding. So this year, the Department of Education asked for $300,000. This is not a large amount of money, right? We're talking about an $8.5 billion state budget. They asked for $300,000 to fully fund this Lead K program, and the legislature agreed on $200,000. And Art Stade, who is a Democratic lawmaker from Cedar Rapids and has been very active in trying to get this Lead K language into the code for years, he stood up and he asked the floor manager, what was the rationale for not fully funding this request? And Carter Nordman just said, well, this was the amount that we agreed on between the House and the Senate. And it's like, it's in debate, in high school debate, we would call that a non-response. Like, okay, but why would you agree? So then I went to the Department of Education. Is there some other pot of money? Because I thought, well, maybe the department told the legislature, like, it's okay if you give us 200,000, we've got 100,000, we can move from somewhere else. But I couldn't get an answer. So I mean, I think if there were a simple answer like that, I think they would have written back to me right away to say, oh yeah, no, we're going to be able to fully fund. So I said, what's going to happen with this? Is this going to be our families just not going to get the services, or the individual school districts or the area education agencies going to be expected to provide these services? And I can't get an answer. But again, $100,000, I mean, it's just nothing in this budget. I can't imagine why the Republican negotiators who worked this all out behind the scenes, I just can't imagine why they wouldn't fully fund this line item.
And if you're shocked and appalled about this, as I am, you think about Kim Reynolds' response to what has just transpired. And we're going to get to that very shortly. But her perspective, yeah, we got the ball rolling. I mean, and that's the whole thing. That's what I'm talking about here.
Right.
It's coming downhill, folks. The snowball is building. This is just the beginning, I believe. Medicaid oversight meetings may stop happening. God, this was... kind of the principle of the thing. These hearings were, I mean, this would help somebody's morale and mind, basically. They're taking away these meetings, Laura?
Well, I would just say the legislature in general has done a very poor job of overseeing the privatized Medicaid program. And again, the worst impacts have been felt by Iowans with disabilities. Many of them had their home-based health services cut. Many had their transportation services cut by these for-profit insurance companies the state hired to take over Iowa Medicaid case management. So it's been a disaster, and I wouldn't say the legislature has done a good job, but they did have a committee. Under the statute, it was supposed to meet twice a year, and members of the public could come and air their grievances basically and flag some problems that were happening within Medicaid. Well, John Forbes, who has served on this oversight committee since its inception and he's the ranking Democrat on the part of the budget that deals with health and human services, he was the one who flagged this in this budget bill. Just a little tiny bit of a policy change. So now instead of shall meet at least 2 times annually, it's may meet annually. So what are the odds that the Republican-controlled Legislative Council is going to continue to hold these Medicaid oversight meetings? I mean, they may meet, and if they do meet, it's only going to be at most once a year instead of mandatory meetings twice a year. So that's just another way of the public's voice getting shut out. But I mean, this is far beyond that. The legislature should have been doing all this time since 2016. They should have been doing a lot more to exercise their power to make sure that the Medicaid recipients are getting the services they're entitled to, and it just hasn't been happening.
Kind of like getting your day in court or getting a fair hearing. It's kind of like objecting to your property tax assessments or something like that. I guess my question would be, do you know, did the public ever prevail in these? I mean, you could get a hearing. I mean, in the past.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that there were some times when the contracts were negotiated. There's been a lot of turnover in the Medicaid program. There have been companies that came and went. But I mean, I think generally the people in the disability community would tell you that they're pretty dissatisfied with the way things have gone. But
Yeah.
I mean, there may have been some individual cases where people got things sorted out, or that when the next time the contract was negotiated, certain protections were put in there. But the state, I just think the fee-for-service Medicaid, generally speaking, when I talk to people in the disabled community, they preferred the old state-run fee-for-service Iowa Medicaid program. They had fewer problems with that program than they do with these for-profit companies coming in there and doing the case management.
All right, let me get to the last one here. Now, this may be the last of the sickly 6, but
Right.
this strikes home with me and some friends of mine too, because they've got friends and family in these residential facilities. Again, this is pitiful. God, I mean, honestly, God, this is pitiful, Laura.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Claire Celsey, a Democratic state senator from the suburbs of Des Moines, she was the one who raised this point. She included an amendment to the Health and Human Services budget that would have increased the personal care allowance for people in residential care facilities. So the majority of Iowans getting this are in nursing homes, but it does also affect people whether due to a physical disability, a developmental disability, or a mental illness, are in a residential care facility. They basically have no capacity to earn income in most cases. And so they get a personal needs allowance of $50 a month. I mean, it's just not very much. $50 a month to cover anything they might like.
Jeez.
And it hasn't increased since 2001. So,
my God.
So Claire Celsey's amendment would have increased it from $50 to $85 a month. Again, we're not talking about a generous amount. And that covers just all kinds of things. I mean, magazines, haircuts. I mean, just but it's just not, it doesn't go far. Let's just put it that way.
Well, yeah.
And the Republican response was, we don't have this money in the budget. It would have cost, they estimated, $5 million a year, of which $3 million would have been federally funded and $2 million would have been from the state because of the way the formula works for this personal needs allowance. And we don't have it in our budget. Again, they're talking about a $2 billion surplus just for this year. We've got reserve accounts that are overflowing, and they're stockpiling money for future tax cuts is what they're doing. And yet we won't throw a couple of $1 million a year at improving the quality of life of people in a residential care facility. It's just sad.
Yeah. And again, it goes to this philosophy. They're stockpiling this money for future tax cuts, as Laura says. For what? How's that work? So that it can go to the top, so that they can trickle it down to the rest of us. And here's this immediate need by the least among us. My God, put yourself in the place of these people in these care facilities. $50 a month hasn't been raised since 2001. This is what I want to give my money for. This is why I'm an American. This is why I'm Iowan. This is why I pay taxes. I want my money to go to people like this, not have to do a GoFundMe or have to do an an earmark or something like that on an individual basis. This is what our government should be doing, as John Kennedy said, and they don't want to do it. It ain't happening.
And we just have the money. I mean, to say that we don't have the money is absurd.
Yeah.
We're sitting on huge surplus accounts. We still have more than $1 billion in American Rescue Plan money that hasn't been allocated. I mean, there is just a lot of funding available if there were the will to do it. And again, the state is going to be spending $107 million dollars this year alone on these private school scholarships. And it's only going to increase from there. Within a few years, we're going to be spending $350 million a year on that, on paying mostly families who are well off enough to afford private school tuition already, paying them to send their kids to private school while the public infrastructure deteriorates. And this is something that Josh Turek emphasized when I talked to him, that the disabled community is stuck. Not only are they not getting these direct services that they need, but then the whole public education system crumbles, and that serves the overwhelming majority of people with disabilities. And there are just many other problems as well. This post, like I said, I was just focused on the budget bills, but this just scratches the surface of how this recent Iowa legislature harm disabled Iowans. It is hard to overstate, and people are going to be feeling the impact for years. Also, I should mention the medical malpractice and the trucking industry, that what they call the tort reform bills that limited the damage awards that people can get. Well, if you are permanently disabled due to a medical error or a catastrophic trucking accident, this is going to affect how much you can recover. And most Iowans won't be aware that this happened, but the unfortunate few dozen families a year who suffer this kind of catastrophe are going to be impacted.
I posted on Facebook here this past week. I'm beginning to think, the dinosaurs wandered off into the tar pits. Some people believed at one time. They seem to be compassionate intellectuals. The dinosaurs that went into the tar pits. It seems to me like, compared to what we're doing, what our legislature is doing, as an example, this is going to come back to bite us. I mean, as human beings, I mean, this is not who we should be. All right, and speaking of that, let's go back here to the Kingfisher. Now, this is Kim Reynolds touting Iowa's rising national profile. She defends contentious legislation. Or I want you to comment on this, because I've seen some of your stuff in Bleeding Heartland, and you take a hard look at photos and videos and stuff the governor does. These are all scripted. Those people are chosen to be behind her. What the hell? What kind of a photo op is this? This is representing the state of Iowa for somebody of color, somebody with a disability, as we talked about, for poor people. This is an insult. I mean, I look at that photo, I'm like, what the hell? What is this? Looks like the Trump family standing behind her, or the Beverly Hills Housewives or something. I mean, I mean, she's got to be smarter than that, you would think, but no.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember last year when she signed the bill, the transgender sports ban, she was just surrounded by white girls and mostly white blondes. I mean, it was like, I mean, it was the opposite of diversity. Yeah, look, and I wanted to say, because I mentioned earlier that most state agencies were left to make do with status quo budgets this year, I just want to mention that the governor's office got an increase in their budget of more than 20%, something I did a deep dive on a couple of weeks ago, that the Republican legislature just approved, basically whatever the governor asked for, we're going to give her. The governor's office has been overspending its budget for many years. And now, as a reward for that, I guess, they are getting an enormous budget increase while everybody else is being stuck with a budget that doesn't even keep up with rising costs. So yeah, Ron DeSantis was here yesterday, and he talked a lot about how Iowa and Florida are basically leading the way and showing how it's done. And there are those states, I would say, are political anomalies. I mean, this agenda, I don't think this is nationally a popular agenda. It's something, but like you said, elections have consequences. the governor, even with the majorities that she had a year ago, probably wouldn't have been able to get a lot of these bills through. But it's an enormous majority, 64 out of the 100 House seats and 34 out of the 50 Senate seats. There are just no guardrails right now for her. And it makes me worry about what they're going to try to do next year when they come back.
Well, Laura, you're making this stuff up. They say you're a progressive. This isn't real. I mean, I obviously they can't. You got to be making this up. Yeah. Let me read into this very quickly. I don't think there's anything new here, but she signed a bill into law Wednesday that will allow physician assistants to practice without a supervising doctor. Governor Kim Reynolds defended controversial legislation passed this session, the stuff that Laura's talking about, arguing an influx of residents shows Iowa's on the right path. Okay, I've looked at these stats. I don't know if I would. It's an influx, I guess. There is a positive, very small increase in Iowa's population. Our national profile is rising, Reynolds said at a Washington County hospital Wednesday afternoon after signing House File 424. We're reducing taxes and regulations. We're building our healthcare system. What you talking about? We're building our health. What is that? We've been recognized as a top 10 state to live in by the U.S. News and World Report. Top 10, Iowa. So I am excited about what is happening, and I'm excited about our future. Okay.
I think what she's talking about with building the healthcare system is that they did include a little bit of state funding to increase the nurses education program at the University of Iowa, and also a fellowship for OBGYNs. But I mean, let's get real.
Yeah.
OBGYNs as a group don't want to practice in red states where they're about to ban abortion. And the governor earlier in the year, when she signed the medical malpractice damage award, she made it sound like, oh, this is going to really help us build, this is going to cause more doctors to come and work in Iowa. Not really. Honestly, I mean, rural hospitals have been closing, and the hospitals that are still open have been closing their labor and delivery units. A lot of it is because of declining population, aging population. It wasn't ever really related to the medical malpractice landscape in Iowa. And as I talk to people in the medical community and they talk about what's in the recruiting letters and postcards and brochures that they get all the time, it doesn't talk about the malpractice environment. So, I mean, this is a story that she's telling, a narrative that she's spinning, that we're making Iowa this great welcoming place, but we're losing college graduates. People are going to work in higher wage states that they don't trample on the rights of women and LGBTQ people. And I think it's going to be a big problem. I'm actually waiting to see what happens over the next few years with the enrollment at Iowa State universities. We've long relied on lots of students from St. Louis area, Chicagoland. And I think fewer of those people are going to want to come to study in Iowa.
Okay, well, we're out of time here. Like I said when we started, especially I get on a roll here. I honestly, God, I can't tell. It's what in the hell is going on? Well, that's a little bit of what's going on, Laura. I know that this is just the beginning of your reporting in this series, this follow-up on what the Iowa Legislature did, and it doesn't sound like there's much good there to be found. But we're going to see more of that in Bleeding Heartland. Give us a wrap up here. Give us a close, and we'll take it out with your comments.
Yes. Well, again, there's a lot more to dig into with the bills that were passed, the budget bills and the other bills that the governor either has already signed or is about to sign. But yeah, it was a really bad session for Iowans with disabilities, for LGBTQ Iowans, for public education. And we are going to be feeling the impact for years to come. But yeah, people can find that reporting at www.bleedingheartland.com. There's also a Bleeding Heartland Facebook page. I am on Twitter at Laura R. Bellin, and on various other social media, Mastodon posts, if people are using those, also at Laura R. Bellin.
All right, great. She's pulling back the veil, folks. She's pulling back the curtain to reveal Oz back there. And it's mostly Kim Reynolds, a friend of Donald Trump's, believe it or not, and an admirer of Donald Trump's. That's the way I think of Kim Reynolds. It would appear to be so when you look at the press ops and that type of thing. I don't know how you could say otherwise.
Yeah, although she was just with Ron DeSantis yesterday, so at his picnic event in Sioux County. So
not much to pick and choose from there. All right, Laura. Again, a happy Mother's Day. Thanks for coming on this special edition of Podcast by George. We'll circle back very soon. Unfortunately, it'll be sooner rather than later because of the nuttiness afoot in the state of Iowa. Thanks again, Laura.
Thank you, George.
And folks, I want to tell you this as we wrap up here with Laura. I hope you enjoy seeing her on Podcast by George. and follow her in all of these other places. If you can, just go on the web and check out that, it's a half hour, maybe it's an hour long, the KHOI radio show that she's on, Capital Week, where she wraps up each week what's going on. That's really good. I've listened to that. And I mean,
KHOIFM.org.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that. Yes.
Yeah, KHOIFM.org. And folks, if you like Podcast by George, do what I always recommend. Go to podcastbygeorge.com. It's really easy. I mean, you can sign up on all these individual platforms, but you can sign up on all of them, I think, on Podcast by George. You can go and like us and follow us on Facebook. You can subscribe on YouTube. And once you get there, ring the notification bell, give us a comment, a thumbs up on YouTube. And then, of course, sign up on iTunes. You can get the audio there, or Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, wherever you get your audio podcast. But that is going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.